Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Sanch here. Welcome back to the Bodybuilding News Network. Today we're going to be talking about Neil Curry. So let's get right into it. In a recent episode here on, or not here, but on the Fuad Abiyad podcast, Bodybuilders and Bullocks, something like that. IFBB Pro Classic Physique New York Pro Champion and Olympian Neil Curry announced that he's going to be moving to the open class bodybuilding in 2023. Neil and his coach Ben Chow discussed the pros and cons potentially of Neil Curry moving from classic physique to open in the coming year. In this podcast with Fuad, Ben, and Neil Curry, Ben highlighted how Neil actually looked stage ready when he was already 30 pounds above the weight cap, and that causes a lot of issues for someone when you look like you're ready to get on stage, but you have to cut down 30 pounds from 244, as you saw in the thumbnail, to 215 pounds, which is his weight cap for his height. So now let's take a look at Neil Curry's winning physique from the New York Pro this last year and compare it to his physique that he brought to this recent 2022 Olympia. And let's go ahead and start off with the iconic shot that isn't a mandatory for Neil Curry, and that's going to be this front lat spread. Now, I did think potentially this could be a most muscular, but in all realities, I do think this is a front lat spread. Now, like I said, this is one of his signature shots. I think he does a phenomenal job of bringing this physique and the flow of it to the stage. Some big improvements as we look at the New York Pro versus the Olympia physique. I think that the way that he popped his chest forward really accentuates the fullness and adds some extra, wild card features to that X taper frame. It really does, in my opinion, I think look better. From the legs, Neil and his coach Ben brought, in my opinion, some next level conditioning, separation, detail. You can see cross striations in the quads. Overall conditioning, I thought, was an absolute improvement from the right package compared to the left package at the Olympia. Moving into the front double, I feel like a lot of the same sentiments can be carried on from the lat spread to the front double. I think that there is going to be some need for him to add some thickness in the arms, in my opinion, as well as the chest, as Totoro joins us here. I know you guys appreciate him as much as I do. And I think that from what we've been able to take away from that podcast they just did, a lot of things happened in that prep that caused him to potentially look stringy. And, it's going to explain a lot of this. You look at, it was a 24-week prep. He lost, give or take, 10 quality pounds of tissue, of muscle, and that's definitely going to be taking away from his physique. Moving to it's a modification of the side tricep. Neil does make improvements in the presentation. I like the way he just added a layer of detail and crispiness to the presentation on this side tricep shot, although it's not a traditional way that we like to see it. He does bring the legs together, which does add some well-needed detail in the quads, as you can see at the most recent Olympia, making those improvements. And he also adds just a small amount of detail I thought I noticed in the brachialis of the right presenting arm. But of course, to be fair, that could just be lighting. Of course, I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. Moving on to the ab and thigh, it would seem that there was somewhat debatably a trade-off from the New York Pro to Las Vegas, where the most recent Olympia was held. At the New York, I thought that he looked to have more detail in the legs, but it definitely is clear that the midsection does have some improvement. He did bring a tighter look, a more streamlined look to the midsection and added a lot of extra detail. So kudos to him on that. I also want to mention that the beard and hair, I thought, gave him a nice, healthy look. of course, that definitely could be a biased opinion on my part. But for the side chest, I feel like I would say that the posing needs to be improved upon. Neil did mention in the podcast that him and his coach Ben Chow have addressed the discrepancy in leggingness of the drop of the hamstring, and that's why they've incorporated a interesting way of training the hamstrings 3 times a week. In my opinion, and I'm sure in his coach's opinion as well, it's going to add the needed thickness that he's going to need, as well as the drop factor for that side shot in the hamstring that currently is lacking. Sticking with the side chest, I definitely think another win here for Neil with the presentation. I think that it really does accentuate the side chest, the shelf of the chest overall, and somewhat of a vacuum if you really look at it. I think also adds some width and thickness to that right delt that's presenting, as well as the chest as a whole. From the back, I will quickly reiterate the critiques of the hamstrings. I think that they do look narrow and there's not a lot of detail there, but we have talked about him making the improvements moving into the open. So hopefully that does get corrected. I also would, again, like to see more thickness in the arms. I think overall those could use a few inches. He could also use a couple inches in the calves if we're being super nitpicky. But I think that when you do have amazing calves, especially in the open, it is rewarded. Whereas maybe not having great calves isn't critiqued as much. So kind of a minute point, but I think it's something to at least discuss. Lastly, for the back shots, conditioning in the glutes does look improved, but I do think that that did come at a cost potentially to some thickness and detail in the lower back. At least that's what I think. But of course, let me know your thoughts down below. And overall, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in general on Neil Curry's move to the open division in 2023. Go ahead and leave your thoughts down below in the comment sections, which is actually just underneath the like button. Wink, wink. Now, my take. Now, I do love this move. My only concern, I've been a fan of Neil Curry for quite a while now, all the way back when he got featured on Nick Strength and Power, Nick Miller's channel, talking about some of the best quads coming into the men's classic physique division when he was still a newcomer back in 2018, I believe. He made his amateur, he was still competing as an amateur. He did an amateur Olympia and placed 4th, I do believe. Fact check me. But like I said, my only criticism, or at least my main concern here, is Neil historically has been one of these athletes that has health concerns. I believe it was a gut biome midsection intestinal issue that he had, and he actually had to pull out of the 2020 Olympia. I thought he qualified, or at least he had to pull out of a big show, I do remember. So I'm hoping that Neil and his team over at Hostile continue to put his health and longevity in the sport, and as just as a person in general. I feel like that should be the main priority when we're thinking about these athletes, especially Neil Curry coming into the 2023 season, making his open debut. Now, I will say for Neil Curry's open debut, there's going to be, at least this is my thought, I think that his open debut is going to be in Texas. His coach, Ben Chow, is in Texas. Fuad and the team over at Hostile frequently visit Texas as well. I think that that's a good fit, and I think he's going to end up making his open debut at the Texas Pro. So stay tuned and look out for that. But really, in general, I think any Southern state show is going to be a good option for Neil Curry. You got to remember he is in the UK, so he's going to have to work with flying and traveling, and hopefully visas aren't an issue at that time, but it's definitely something to keep in mind moving forward. As well, I think that there's some big benefits of doing shows in Texas, as, like I said, his coach Ben Chow is local there, so that's going to save Neil Curry and the team hundreds of dollars, potentially even over $1,000 in housing and transportation and possibly food. So that is also a small but very important thing to keep in mind when you yourself are planning a upcoming prep. And of course, if he actually does win that show, it's going to be a somewhat quick turnaround prep, or he probably won't have any time to do a back off set or a deload for the supplements and nutrition side. He's going to do a quick prep hopping into the Olympia in November as it returns for the third time for the three-peat to Orlando, Florida. So stay tuned for that. I'm very excited to visit Orlando come November. So check me out and look for me with the Bodybuilding News Network swag always on. But as always, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you guys subscribe. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll see you in the next one. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. Please like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in another episode.